It's 1961. John F. Kennedy has been inaugurated as US President. Sterling Moss has won the Monaco Grand Prix, and Volvo have just launched this, the P1800. In this video, we're going to talk about its showbiz history, what it's like to run as a classic, and the one that really shocked me is how much they are worth now. Most of us know about its role in The Saint, but there are also some really surprising links to the 007 movie Goldfinger. Firstly though, it almost never appeared in The Saint at all because the TV company that was making that series initially wanted a Jaguar E-Type, but Jag, flushed with the success of the launch at Earl's Court of the E-Type, decided that they didn't need the exposure. And that is where Volvo stepped in. Unusually, one of the cars used on the show actually belonged to the lead actor Roger Moore, and this is where the Goldfinger links start. Not only was Moore himself to later on become 007, but the car that was used in The Saint and that belonged to him, he then sold to actor Martin Benson. Martin Benson played Mr. Solo, a gangster in the film Goldfinger who is offed by Oddjob. But that's not all, because another actress, Shirley Eaton, was also in The Saint, sat in the passenger seat of that very same car, and she played Jill Masters, the iconic girl who was killed by being painted in gold in the 007 film. A fascinating showbiz history then, but what if I was to tell you it wasn't even actually made by Volvo? The mechanicals for the coupe were taken from their then saloon, the 122. The engine initially, at least on the coupe, did have some advantages though. It had a different cam, different carbs, I think slightly higher compression, and it put out initially 115 horsepower. This is the 2-litre version, so it gets another 3 horsepower, but also a useful increase in torque. Now these were designed by a Swede, by Pelle Peterson, who was linked to the Volvo factory. But for a long time, it was the Italian coach builder, Frua, and Gia above him that were credited with the design. In truth, Frua was more of a mentor and overlooked the design of Pelle. So it is a pure Swedish thing, this, and it looks beautiful. Now, the problem is that Volvo didn't have the capacity at that point in time to produce these cars. They were already pretty busy with their saloons. So they wanted to subcontract out. They went to some of the Italian coach builders, but they couldn't find anyone who would take the job. And they ended up, of all places, of going to Jensen in the UK. They commissioned them to build these. And that's really significant for this story. Why is this significant? Because Jensen themselves then subcontracted out the manufacture of the body shells to Pressed Steel, which was a subdivision of BMC. Now, as you know, at the time, labour relations were not the best in the UK. So what happened is Jensen had a contract initially to build 10,000 of these cars. There were constant delays due to the strikes, there were quality issues. So after only, I think 1 year and 6,000 cars built, Volvo decided to take production back in-house. When they started making them in Sweden, they also changed the nomenclature from P1800 to P1800s. And many people think that stands for sport, but it doesn't. It stands for Sweden. There were a few detail changes to the exterior and interior when they were moved in-house, but also quality went up quite drastically on the later cars. There were 1.8 and the 2 litres. This is one of those Swedish built 2 litre examples. It's probably the kind of year of car spec to go for, because you have the more powerful 2 litre engine, but you don't have the plastic dash of the later injected cars. They did, however, benefit from more power, because the fuel injected ones put out 130 horsepower, which is quite a useful increase on 118. These engines, though, are absolutely legendary and are simply bomb-proof. Now, I remember when I was younger and I started getting into classics when I was in my teens, and sadly that is about 30 years ago. These cars didn't really have a very good reputation. Most of what I heard was that despite the flash looks, they just didn't handle. But I think that is due to a misconception. These were always built and marketed as mini GTs, not as sports cars. And it isn't a sports car. Take it in these sort of tight bends, and it really doesn't particularly like it. The steering is overly heavy, even at speeds. The whole car feels quite ponderous. So if you're trying to throw it about, it lacks the nimbleness, the pointy nature that you would want in a proper sports car. But that's totally besides the point. It's supposed to be like a mini Ferrari GT. Incredible looks, real comfort. It's quite well isolated for noise. You don't get to hear the engine much. That was the whole point of these cars. Let's just do another run up through the gears and we'll see what 118 horsepower feels like nowadays. Now, they're not very heavy cars, so that does go in its favor a little bit. It's quite happy to rev this little lump. It goes up to about 6.5 on the tacho, and the gear change has a really nice action to it. This one's got a little bit of play in it, but I presume the gearbox is right under it. That's what it feels like. It has that lovely snicky mechanical feel of these older cars. But yeah, get it on the corner. Steering is quite imprecise, and it just doesn't feel like its natural habitat is a tight corner. Now this one has overdrive, and at about 50 miles an hour, you're doing 3,000 revs. It's quite quiet in the cabin. Even wind noise is pretty absent. And mid-range is good. It's quite responsive. So I think its sort of lacking of ability as a sports car isn't so much down to lack of power or the power plant, just that it wasn't designed to do that. But threading it through these lanes, it's still quite satisfying and quite nice. It's just the tighter corners, or if you push it too hard, where it seems to work a little bit less well. Now, quality is another area that we have to discuss. Did you know that the P1800 is the car recorded in the world with the highest mileage? So there was a model in the US that in 2019 had already racked up 3.2 million miles, and that was warranted by the Guinness Book of Records, so it's not some sort of idle boast. And if you drive one like I have today, that is what strikes you. It feels really well built. There's incredible attention to detail. The interior, let's just start with that. Beautiful 60s interior. A little bit of a sporting feel to it with the 3 gauges there. A nice leather covered dash. And then just some beautiful little touches like the door handles and the window wipers, which both have little ribs on them. Lots of chrome around the instruments. The Volvo logo embossed in the door panels. The little chrome gear stick, it just looks lovely. And that beautiful detailing continues outside the car, because the chrome lines that run across the side, they start with the door handles that are molded into that same shape. Now, worm and roller steering systems are notorious for having a little bit of slack off center. I think this one maybe needs adjusting because it has a bit more than even I would be expecting on this kind of system. If it wasn't for that though, I think this would make a very great relaxed cruiser. As it is now, you have to correct it a little bit more than you'd want. Last time I looked at prices, admittedly a very long time ago, these were around, I think, between £7,000 and £10,000, and I was expecting it to be something similar. It had gone up maybe to 15, something like that. Everything's gone up recently, but I was pretty shocked when I had a look and found that in fact these cars now go for, it seems that a starting price is about £30,000 and sort of 30 to 50 is a normal price range. Now that seems like an awful lot of money, but only because they were so underappreciated in the past. Alphas and the like of this era always had a much better reputation than these. They were worth a lot more money. This is now seems to be approaching Alpha Giulia prices. So they definitely have gone up a lot, but having been in it today, I think it's worth every penny. The seats are really comfortable, they're beautiful to sit in. The interior feels like a high-class product. And I was just talking to Peter earlier about what competitors these would have had at the time, and he mentioned, you know, an MGB. To me, this is far superior to an MGB. And in terms of ride, for example, it is much better, although perhaps even a tad less sporty. You know, some say that it is Volvo's greatest ever car. Would I agree with that? I don't know, but I think it comes very, very close to that. The only thing that takes away from it a little bit is that it's just not a driver's car. Not a criticism per se, because it's supposed to be more of a tourer. But for me personally, that does detract slightly, but all the same, I love it. I love the way it looks, I love the quality, and they're just great cars. Now, there is a little twist in the tale, and I mentioned earlier that the fact that it was produced by Jensen was really so significant. That is because what happened in that first year of production, when they were supposed to make 10,000 cars, they only made 6, is that Volvo ended up with a surplus of the engines and gearboxes that were supposed to go in the coupes. They decided to fill that over capacity. They didn't have enough, actually, of the normal engines. So a hot version of the saloon was essentially born because they couldn't make enough coupes. That is the Amazon 123 GT. And incredibly, only a few weeks ago, I did a review on one of those. So do have a look at that and see the history behind that. That is also a really intriguing and actually a very good car. Thank you so much to Peter for coming down. Thank you all even more for watching. If you have a car you want me to do a review on, please get in touch. And I really look forward to seeing you for the next video.